Well guys, I'm pretty sure that I've said this before, but a real estate development project out of Saudi Arabia has officially outdone anything else that we've ever talked about here on the channel. Today, we are getting into the wildest, biggest, and most ambitious real estate project I have ever seen or heard of. This one is called The Line, and it's a skyscraper that will stand about 150 stories tall. It will be about 600 feet wide, and it will set the record for the longest skyscraper ever built, stretching 100 miles over the Saudi Arabia desert and mountains.
Imagine a traditional city and consolidating its footprint. The Line is 500 meters tall, 200 meters wide, 170 kilometers long, and housed within an elegant mirror glass facade.
Let's just take a second to make sure that all that sinks in. Yes, you heard that right. We're talking about a skyscraper that stands 150 stories tall and that stretches 100 miles wide. The project has been heavy on the minds of engineers and local officials since it was announced last year. It'll cost $1 trillion to pull off, and the structure is so big that they're calling it a linear city, a city that will house around 9 million people once it's finished. In today's episode, we are going to dive into the backstory on this crazy project. We'll talk about what amenities you can expect to receive if you choose to live in this place. And of course, we'll get into the logistics of whether or not it's possible to ever pull something like this off in our lifetimes. But spoiler alert, I think it's far more likely than you might guess. Right now, you might be thinking that this all sounds like some futuristic pipe dream, but the group behind this project has actually already spent over $1 billion in infrastructure, plans, and consulting. So even though their plan might seem insane, they're taking this project very seriously right now. So the main driver behind all of this is Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He's calling the skyscraper community a civilization revolution that puts humans first based on radical urban planning. And this is definitely a legacy project for Prince Salman. He has also said that he wants this to be his modern version of the Egyptian pyramids. Main use for this ridiculously large skyscraper will be for people to live in, but it will be a completely self-sustained community. That means that if you do choose to live here, then you really never need to leave because it'll offer you a place to live, but also a place to work and as many forms of entertainment as you can imagine. What they're doing is they're basically taking an entire traditional city like we know it and then smashing it into a linear skyscraper instead of a more traditional spread out city. On the website for the project, they actually have this really cool illustration of what Manhattan and New York would be like if they instead just built it out to be one linear city. You get the idea here. A lot less land is used, which makes room for a lot more nature, which is kind of cool. It's really hard to even wrap your head around this thing because it is just so big and so unusual. But to give some perspective regarding the height, they are proposing this to be 1,600 feet tall. That's about 125 feet taller than the Empire State Building in New York City. Then on top of that, they're saying that the single building will stretch over 100 miles. The entire island of Manhattan in New York from north to south is only about 13.4 miles, which means that this one building in Saudi Arabia will stretch the length of about 7 Manhattans stacked together. Another way to look at this is that it takes 17.6 football fields to stretch just one single mile. So that means that at 100 miles, this skyscraper will be over 1,700 football fields long. Having a building that's this tall and this long means that obviously there's going to be a bunch of little communities and neighborhoods that are kind of staggered throughout the thing. But what's cool is that even though driving 100 miles would take you around an hour and a half, depending on how fast you're going, they're going to be building a high-speed train that runs under this skyscraper. And this train will take you from one side of the building to the other in just 20 minutes. Naturally, with all the money they're sinking into this project, this building will be loaded with amenities. Some of those amenities include vertical farming throughout. There will be a yacht marina on the far west side of the building. For sporting events, they have a stadium proposed, but of course, it's not just any stadium. It will be suspended 1,000 feet in the sky, which has never been done before. And then back on the food food topic, if you do live there, you'll be able to pay a subscription fee to get breakfast, lunch, and dinner included with your rent. Now the Line skyscraper is actually part of a much bigger project out there that they are calling Neom. We aren't gonna get into all the details on the Neom project today, but the project is focused on this region in Saudi Arabia where there will be 3 massive real estate development projects that are supposed to totally reshape the future of the country. Each project will be located in a different section of this region, and the Line skyscraper that we're talking about today will run west to east, starting in the water in the Gulf of Aqaba, and then headed inland through the desert and through the mountains. Prince Mohammed said that the Neom project in total will be about the same size as Massachusetts, which is pretty large. Massachusetts is about 10,000 square miles. And a big reason that he's wanting to build all of this out is to give locals and foreigners more of a reason to visit and to diversify away from their main source of revenue, which is oil. The initial pitch for this project started in January of 2021, but they have made a ton of ground since they first got started back then. There's really 3 challenges to being able to pull something like this off. The first challenge is how do you come up with a design that makes sense from an engineering, a sustainability, and an environmental standpoint. Second, how do you bring together all of the manpower to actually build this project out in the middle of nowhere? And last, most importantly, where the heck are you going to get $1 trillion in order to pull this whole thing off? Well, on the money front, of course, there's some local resources that will help to make a dent in the huge budget, but it looks like the prince has also gone out to New York City to try to win over Wall Street, talking about how to get a hedge fund on board to finance a $500 billion foreign real estate investment is definitely way outside of my pay grade, but something tells me this was not an easy pitch for the prince. Regarding the manpower and how you get this built, it's great if they do move forward with the bill that it'll create hundreds of thousands of jobs, but the real concern is getting that many skilled people on board to commit to such a big project for such a long time. Then on the design front, they've actually come up with a pretty solid design that most people are on board with, but a very common critique from the environmental planners is that this building will be so big and so unusual that it will literally impact the migration of millions of birds and other animals that typically move through this region. How crazy is that we are talking about a building that is so large and so long that it will literally impact the migration of birds? Another challenge, believe it or not, is with the curvature of the earth too, because it turns out the earth arches at about 8 inches per mile. So in order for them to be able to actually build a skyscraper that is 100 miles long, the skyscraper would literally need to bend around the world. It couldn't sit square like a regular building. Despite all of these challenges, the goal is to make this building very energy efficient, carbon neutral, no emissions, all of that. So it's cool that they are trying to propose something as sustainable as possible. Original estimates from engineers said that this whole project would take around 50 years to pull off. Of course, the prince is saying that he wants to see it done by 2030, which we all know is impossible. But whether or not this actually gets built, we have to remember that this is not the first overly ambitious project that we've seen come out of the Middle East, and some of those other ones actually got built. I mean, if we look at just Dubai as an example, some of the most innovative and impressive structures ever built came out of there, like the Burj Khalifa and the 7-star Burj Al Arab Hotel. Not to mention the other unbelievable projects out there like the man-made Palm Island and the World Islands. Norman Rule on Twitter summarized his thoughts really well on the project, saying that the ambition and perspective of the line are extraordinary. Whether or not it's achieved, the paradigm shows a commitment to dramatic innovation. I hope they pull it off because this would be a super fun project to follow for the next 10 or 20 years if they do move forward with it as planned. If you enjoyed the episode today, guys, hit that like button down below before you go. That really helps the channel out a lot. But that's all I've got for you this time. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, see ya.